walk up and whip him.
Alright, go stream go. Happy New Year, everyone.
Die already. Now you don't have your bone. Oh, you got it. You got it. Oh, give me some meat. Now, I think it's this stage, or this section. Like if you fall down between the gaps down there, you actually don't die. You just go to a different alternate stage. I'm going to try not to do that.
Weird. It's a first.
Because... Oh! I got a regular boss.
I don't want to host.
I'm not sure. We'll see. I got these mobs are hanging around the lake. And then hanging around me because they're pissed off because I busted the lake. I don't know if I should go which way. I forget. Sure, I'm going the wrong way. We'll see. Am I going the wrong way? Tell me, am I going the wrong way? Yeah.
There we go. God, I hope they sign Carlos Hyde back. Just give him like another year or two.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I can think I even have to.
I mean, I want him. I mean, I noticed a trend with me when there's like an old school player that's been there a while. I don't want to see him go. Like Eric Reed. I don't want to see Eric Reed go either. I want to say Eric Reed's. He's a free agent at the end of this year also, which scares me because he's a pretty good player.
Bam! He turns to dust. Poor bastard. He does that too if you just walk by him and don't even touch him. He'll just turn to dust. Do I need that? Yeah. And this is the prequel, the direct prequel to Symphony of the Night. I thought it was.
It's pretty cool that we got
a
decent team.
This one at the beginning of that. That's pretty awesome.
I mean, I've been saying all year long
There's no like ×2 or ×3
that we got a decent team. We just need to
I mean, you're as powerful as you're gonna
just
get.
kind of catch a little luck and get a little consistency and make some plays, and stuff would start to turn around. And sure enough, we get Jimmy G back there and he's starting to make some plays at quarterback. Then everybody else starts making plays. I've been saying that all year long. Even when we were 0-9, I was sitting there going, I know we're a decent team. I know we're a decent team. We just need to catch that groove. And as soon as we catch that groove and get some consistency, boom, bam. Disconnected. Just like I said, I knew we had a good team. Because, I mean, I saw it. I mean, it's like we would play good a little bit, and then we just couldn't finish it off.
Yeah.
And here now we play good for a little bit, and we finish it off.
Yeah. He's gonna dragon punch me. I thought he was going to. Yeah, because I know he does like a dragon punch. Yeah, there he goes. Chad, you're dead. See if I can do it in midair. Yeah! I think it's the best pose you can get in this game. You get bonus points for that. Stage 4. More amazing music.
Damn, that fucking blows.
They dead.
That sucks.
Dracula just make himself out of
The 49ers haven't had anything go right literally the last like 3-4 years plus.
Take over Dracula.
Marquise Goodwin, he only needed like
Dracula can be defeated.
65, 67 some odd yards or some crap like that to get 1,000 yards receiving on the year. He gets like 30, 40 yards in the game yesterday. Pow! Gets hit with a freaking hard-ass hit. A hard-ass, pretty dirty hit that was flagged pretty obviously yesterday. And he gets a concussion and he doesn't get his 1,000 yards. So disappointing, man. If he would have played that full game, he would have had him 1,000 yards easy. I would have put my life on it. That guy catches passes all day long. All he needed was like another like 2 or 3 passes caught, and he would have had himself 1,000 yards.
I think this was the normal way, not the alternate way.
That was so disappointing. But either way, though, I know in my heart of hearts he's an 1,000-yard receiver. He's a good receiver too. He's got super good quickness, and that ain't easy to catch. If he catches that pass in stride, oh man, he's catching the pass and getting yards. Plus, I think him and Jimmy G, they have a good rapport, like a good consistency, and they can link up pretty well through a game, which is going to be awesome, because that's what we need. We just need somebody out there who can catch passes and run for some yards. And that fucking kid can break them. That kid can run. He's a quick motherfucker.
I like how the bars of the jail cell, I assume they're like jail cells.
He does not slow down. He just freaking hauls ass. I was gonna say, I like that kid. And I kind of wonder how well he would have done this year if we would have had Pierre Garçon on the other side of the field catching passes for 80% of the season. Because, shit, he went down like 4 or 5 games in, I think. And Pierre Garçon's not that bad either.
No! No, I bet you all the hits I gave him, I have to do again. Just because I went off screen.
But I said we were going to do something this year. It was a little late, but we still did something this year. Ah.
There. Got it.
Okay, let's see if I can not suck this time. Jesus, apparently not. No!
Huh.
Can't you like lock the stairs?
Look at that.
Close them, like once I come up? There you go. Still less than half my life though. I believe I defeated him without much trouble the first time. Okay, I'm gonna go right this time instead of up. Probably just an item over here or something special.
I hope I'm doing this right.
Oh, another one of these guys. Good. That's what I wanted. Stay still. Give me lots of money. Oh, these little baby ones. If I could get
See,
away
now I
from
should
you,
just leave,
you know,
but
using this red skeleton, I could fight you.
no. I want to be the passenger.
No, you have to have your red skeleton, your invincible red skeleton here. Even the crosses don't defeat the red skeleton. No, 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 no. I gotta wait for that guy to come down here. So I can use it to jump up there. Wait, one thing. At least I started with some cool. I can do this, I believe in me. I can't believe these little balls hurt me. And they're barely moving, so they can't weigh very much. Go down here. That's probably, you know, went the other way. This is where I come up. I'm gonna quit running away. So they run towards me. Yeah. Y'all could just like stop for a second. I just really need to attack you. I think it's too much task for you to die. Okay, I really need some meat. I don't think there's any right here, and I don't think there's a door. Oh crap. I gotta start all the way back down there. You know what? I'm gonna go back down to the alternate stage 2. Maybe the alternate stage 3 or something. I don't know. Nah, because it won't matter. Because if I don't go to the alternate part of that, I won't go to the alternate. Now, you know what? I'll continue this. I can change that if I want, but I don't. Not yet. That's a later stage. I've beaten this before with like 100% or however high it goes. That was a long time ago. I don't have that save file anymore. I don't know how old this one is. Yeah, skull. Come here. Come here. You got it. Come here. Come here.
I think I'm just going to say screw it trying to get away. I'm just going to try and use this phone thing, the phone circuit. So I want to say I still need credit for that. It's coming down between a decision. Do I want to just leave and get nothing? Or do I want to get something out of this? And I'm thinking I want to get something out of this.
Room, yeah, some items float around. Now I just have to kill the red sword. The leader of all of them. Come down here, jump to your death. You're next. This isn't going to be well for you. Nope, told you. Moving painting. Not supposed to attack me yet. Oh, I like how it makes you part of the painting and it just kills you. I'll take it. And your red sword.
Found something.
Die.
Damn it. Damn it.
Okay, I think I'm just gonna rush on this guy. He's right.
This is embarrassing.
I can't. The door's all blocked.
Wow. Have I gotten more than two?
No, 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 no!
Lord. There we go, I got one. How about that? Wow, 2 in a row. I'm special.
Even then, my reaction time is as good as it should be.
I don't think the radio or the phone thing would be right here. They normally keep that stuff spread apart. Like the radio thing's over here, the light thing's over there, the boat is... I mean, they keep everything pretty well spread out. Like, you won't go to one spot and find everything. Oh, you son of a bitch.
I don't like the part that it takes a while.
Shit. Found me. Oh well. At least I got some repairs.
The red sword.
Son of a bitch. I repair the goddamn boat the whole way, and then he just takes off in it.
No!
It's about the story of my life.
No fair, you stupid painting.
I do everything and somebody else takes credit for it.
Paintings are stupid. No one has ever invented that was just meant to be what we make.
And now I'm gonna fucking die.
Alright. That doesn't help.
Oh my god.
Not now. Doesn't help now, though. Okay, I'll try it with this. Thank you. Paintings are stupid. Drawings are way better. I'm just saying, no. Hi! Christ! What the shit? One more try. I believe I can get past that stupid thing.
Why isn't it fucking ripping his mask off? Him like 6 times.
Clearly I've been by it before. That's right here. Do that. Jump. I should jump. Up there. Alright, a little death for each of you. Back in the room. Oh! What? They haven't even activated yet. Come they did it. This game thinks of everything now.
Okay.
Come to mommy. Come to mommy, Jason. Come to mommy. Come to mommy.
Can I? Let me go out? No. Not that I need it. Don't jump, Joe. I can't remember my own name. It bounces back when it gets hit. Get back here. understand. I've never had this much problem with this game, like ever. This is the first time I've ever died playing this game. I'm sure that, I usually don't die playing video games. I don't know why I keep doing that. No, I think that might have worked a little better last time. Yeah. Except when you do. Keep locking my focus on that red number, ignoring all the other ones, which I shouldn't do that. I don't know how many hits you need, probably about 30. Or are you? Yeah! Only took me 13 tries. But I did it! Golden thing. My whip does. I really don't need you guys here. I only invited you. Stop it. Just please die. I just want to get to the boss, okay? Anyone have any meat? Do some. I'm hungry. Still with me? A lot of you are. Sucking you while you cussing! Don't suck me while I cuss. Alright, 21. Cross up fears. See if I can do it. You would say that. Item crash. What was that little noise you're making? Can't quite imitate it yet. Dang, those are a lot of little sicklers. Okay, he's gonna do something mean and scary now. Okay, that's not that mean. They're just scary. Oh, I thought it said I had 3 more lives left. 3 more things. Well, guys, I'm gonna cut loose. Thanks for tuning in. Gonna read some comments before I go. I'm really gonna get here. Game name is Dracula X Rondo of Blood or something like that. Joe needs to lift more. Thank you. Appreciate that. Also, I'm a little too wide, a little too pasty. My mouth is too big. My teeth are fucked up. Don't forget that. Let's do this again. Yeah, I plan on streaming more, not necessarily in a regular fashion, but I would like to stream more, especially since I got this OBS thing set up. I should stream Green Dog.
You did stream Green Dog.
Am I going trick-or-treating? Probably not. Now I'm playing on a TurboGrafx CD with a Super System card, actually. Not if you will. Do a video where Dave and I play each other. I'd like to get Dave down here for this, if he doesn't mind. No, that was not a Turbo Duo, but by now you've seen my answer. Dude, how do you remember your name? It's just a bunch of random letters saying things about pyramids on Mars. No, that's Dave's name.
I don't think I found a gas tank, a propeller. Well, maybe I did find the battery.
Something like that. If I didn't change the title, I'm sorry. I know I changed the thumbnail. But, oh well. Anyways, guys, where's my phone? Thank you very much for tuning in, and I'll see you next time.
Equals 35. 40 plus, okay.
Alright guys, so this is Amazing Frog. Let's try it out. Oh wait, I think I'm moving. Can you move? Give it your controller. Oh, yeah, okay, so I am, what? So you're on the right, and I'm on the left. Okay. And, what? Oh, I'm here too, okay. I keep falling the fuck down all the time. I thought I was gonna pick you up, but then I just like, hold on, I'm trying to figure. Hey, does anything work for you? Where did you find this shit?
Uh-oh. Disconnect. Good. I gotta take a break anyway.
Can't you jump? I don't know. You're a frog, but you can't. Oh! I'm on a fucking.
What the hell is this game? That's one good thing about James and Mike Mondays. Sometimes they just play some random shit. You're like, what the hell is this?
Yeah. Why is there?
This is gonna go up there with Goat Simulator. Alright, I'm gonna take like about probably a 5-minute break, maybe.
Don't go in there.
At the most.
Oh, God. Okay, cool. Alright, okay.
Alright, I didn't take that one.
Alright, I'm leaving. Goodbye. Get the fuck over it. Hit B. Oh, there we go. Oh! Da, 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 da. Oh! Oh. Okay, get on with me. Whoa! Gotta hit it.
What the fuck is this?
Yeah! Boom! Oh boy. Whoa! Whatever the deal with the letters? Why is it getting less? You have to hit right in the middle. You have to. It's gotta be right where the target is. Try. It's not that easy. Yeah, it's hard. Try to hit the top of the building, too. Okay. Oh. I'm not Whoa! There's another trampoline. Fuck. Wait, look. If I go up here, I think there's another one. Oh my god. Oh wait, that's not. Dude, I've been like flying around a button. I'm still going. Oh. Dude, I found like a giant button. Wow. Oh, look at the dots. Oh, look, it's like a game. Look at the balloons. Look where I am. Hey, is it the swing? Boing! Whoa! Wow! Oh my god, I blew up the bus! What's going on with my guy? Look at me, look at me! Whoa! Oh my god, look at these two things going on! What the fuck happened?
What the fuck is this?
Dude, I'm playing basketball. Look at that shit. Oh, I'm gonna fucking slam dunk. Look what I'm gonna fucking do. Oh, do it. Oh, well, you dunked yourself, so I guess that's... Oh, cannon into the fucking castle. Go a little higher with the angle. Okay. Into the bounce. Like, try to cannon, raise it up a little bit. So, yeah. Well, I don't know where we need to go. Oh. Yeah. Right, here we go. Yeah. So I don't want to over. It launches pretty far. How does it? Oh, here we go. Come on, get it. Here we go. Yes! Yeah! Your hands in the fucking hole. Can you get out? Dude, I'll get. Oh, I see you. Look. You see me? I'm coming for you. Oh! How you doing? Why is it farting happening? Why wouldn't it, Ray?
Why wouldn't there be?
Alright, now we're good to go. You ready to go on the sound? Yeah. Come on, tell me this works. Yes! Oh! Dude, I got a remote control car. Nice. Maybe that's what the ramps are for. Let's see. Oh, this is awesome. That's not that bad. Dude, I got a crown on the head. How'd you do that? I have no idea. Did that just happen out of nowhere? Pretty much. I mean, there was a guy wearing it, I think, and I knocked it off his head. And now it's on you? Yeah. Oh. Well, there you go. Oh! Would you have an outfit on? Yeah. Wow, okay. So if you take a shit, that's how you come out? Yeah. Of course. Now that we got cars, now let's just fuck around. Now. Oh yeah. Here. Whoa! I don't know, you want to jump on maybe? I don't know, I'll try. Oh, wait. Yeah, just take, oh. Damn. I'm trying to stop. Oh, shit. Oh my god. There we go. Oh, yeah. Okay, make a left. Make a left.
Make a left?
Yeah, that, the other way. The other way.
Oh, you mean go straight?
No, yeah, that way. Go straight now.
Straight, okay.
No, not straight on the road. Go left.
Go off-road,
Yeah.
okay.
Go straight now.
Oh, that's your car.
That's my car.
Shit, oh, hey!
Oh!
Alright, here, get on again.
Oh my god, oh my god, oh my god. Fuck! Oh, get on the fucking wave runner! Oh, dude, I've gotta get there. I'm gonna get there. Where's that sign? Fuck.
Oh, it's a shark! It's a shark!
Oh shit. Oh, he's eating you!
Oh my...
Is he gonna kill you?
Oh.
There's another shark! Dude, I'm coming. There's 3 sharks!
Oh my god,
What the
these
fuck?
fucking sharks!
Yeah.
Well, anyway, that was a good, pretty high note to end on with the sharks. Well, this is, it must be the stupidest game I've ever seen in my life. And I think this is one of those games where they're still working on, too. Like, they're like,
They might be, yeah.
Yeah. So,
Alright.
maybe there's something more to do here that we don't know. You know, it's the first time either of us even, like, heard of it.
I don't know, I just wanted to try it.
We were just looking on Steam, like, oh, let's look for some weird games, like, oh, what's this? And then you play it, it's like just what the fuck, like,
What is this?
yeah, so I don't know what this, if there's any more to this, or if there's any,
Yeah, like, let us know. If there's, like, a ton that we're, like, missing, maybe we'll come back to it. Like, if we find out that
I doubt that.
Yeah, I don't
That game is too whack. Holy cow. Yeah, see, funny how I watched that and then I clicked down and Goat Simulator's right there.
In 1989, the 16-bit generation officially begun with the August release of both the Sega Genesis and TurboGrafx 16. But that same year, the Nintendo Entertainment System was at the peak of its popularity, selling just under 10 million consoles here in North America. In 1991, the 16-bit generation turned into the famed 16-bit console wars with the August release of the Super Nintendo. This system launched with only 3 games, but by the time Christmas had arrived, a number of titles were on store shelves that would come to be considered absolute classics on the system. On this episode of Classic Gaming Quarterly, following up on the launch of the Super Nintendo, we take a look at the noteworthy games that would flesh out the system's North American library through its first holiday season.
oh, I see. What else do they say?
Then it has 3D graphics and digital stereo sound, and that Super Mario World is included.
Okay, we'll get it for them.
Why does that look like Mike Starr? I don't think it was, but it looked like him. It was probably his stand-in. Or his double.
The original Gradius was released into the arcades by Konami in 1985. The game is a horizontally scrolling shooter that uses a unique upgrade system in which you collect power-up tokens which can then be used to modify your ship. These upgrades include lasers, missiles, and options, which act as little helper ships, mirroring your movements and providing extra firepower. Tight controls, excellent music and visuals, and fair but challenging difficulty led to Gradius being a hit in the arcades. The game was ported to numerous home platforms and was one of the very first third-party titles released on the Nintendo Entertainment System. A sequel of sorts, called Salamander in Japan and Life Force in the West, was released into the arcades in 1986.
Destroy them all. Pick it up for Pick it up for Control. Pick it up for Vertical.
It was subsequently subsequently ported to the Famicom and NES in 1987, and is easily one of the best shooters on the platform. In 1988, a proper sequel, Gradius 2 Go for No Ya Bo, known as Vulcan Venture in the West, was released into the arcades. The Famicom version released the same year as a very respectable port, and it's a real shame that the game was never localized here in the West. The 1992 Super CD port, which was also never localized here, is much closer to Arcade Perfect and is, in my opinion, one of the very best horizontally scrolling shooters on the PC Engine. In 1989, the third installment in the main series, Gradius 3, appeared in Japanese arcades, and it was this game that was in turn ported to the Super Famicom and released on the Super Nintendo about a week after the launch of the system. As Gradius 2 was never released here in its day, Gradius 3 was, for us, the follow-up to the two NES titles. In Gradius 3, you once again pilot the
I was gonna say, is that the Super Nintendo? And it is.
the hordes of the Bacterion Empire in a game that should feel instantly familiar to veterans of the 8-bit installments. While Gradius 3 is not a huge audio-visual leap over Gradius 2, the game still has gorgeous graphics and tremendous variety between stages, which arguably is characteristic of the franchise. Series tropes like Moai heads and cave levels are joined by variations on a theme, like sand dragons standing in for fire dragons, and gigantic bubbles that break into smaller ones when shot.
It's games like that I'm going to be looking to score on Nintendo and Super Nintendo once I get my retro AVS and my RGB set up perfect.
Level of detail expectedly not yet seen in the series. Unfortunately, when some of these early Super Nintendo games were being created, developers were, for obvious reasons, not able to take advantage of the Super Nintendo's 16-bit processor, and as a result, some games suffer from severe slowdown. As might be expected, this was one of the chief criticisms of Gradius 3 back in its day, as, generally speaking, shooters were most susceptible to slowdown due to the sheer volume of action happening on the screen at any given time. Gradius 3's power-up system now has an edit mode, which allows you to choose which power-ups will be available to you during the game. The advantage of this is that it allows you to tailor the upgrade system to suit your style of play. As has been the case with all games in the series, powering up your ship is the key to success. And starting again at 0 with a slow ship and a pea shooter when you die can be a serious shock. Excellent music composed by the Konami Square Wave Club is a hallmark of practically every Konami game, and Gradius 3 is no exception. Using the Super Nintendo's Ken Kutaragi designed sound chips and excellent effects. I personally think the game is harder than previous installments, but as is the case with the series as a whole, Gradius 3 is a challenging but rewarding game that simply requires practice to master. Both the original Gradius and Life Force are among my favorite games on the NES, and as such, slowdown aside, Gradius 3 would have been well worth purchasing in the late summer of 1991. Raid on Bungling Bay was created by video game designer Will Wright and released on the Commodore 64 in 1984. While designing the game, Wright purportedly felt that he had more fun creating the layouts in his level editor than he did playing the game itself. And his subsequent fascination with level editors culminated in the development of SimCity. The game was designed in 1985
Oh, weird.
for the Commodore 64.
So the people that made that Bungling Bay game was the people who made SimCity. Interesting. I love video game development. It's so cool.
Breathing new life into SimCity.
To increase the amount of creativity a user could put into the system.
It's so interesting how video game development is. I notice when I watch these kinds of videos on video game development, it's very, 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 very similar to the film industry. It's pretty damn close. I mean, a lot of the same kind of... They develop pretty close. It's just the difference of... It's just a game to a movie is the difference. But the way they, like, set up... They structure their development of the content is pretty dang similar. I mean, it's not the same technology. It's not exactly the same. There are differences. But a lot of times I'm like, that's like what the film industry does. They do almost the exact same thing. They go on to do another thing, and then it branches off into something else, and then it goes on into something else, and that's, wow, it's so similar. It's interesting.
It finally made its retail debut on both the Amiga and the original black and white 68K Macintosh, and the following year was finally released on the Commodore 64, as well as the DOS PC, where it became one of the most beloved games of my adolescence. SimCity is an interesting game in that it has no clear objective. You start off with an empty swath of land and must set up infrastructure in the form of power lines and roads, and set zoning for parcels of land, either residential, commercial, or industrial. You then watch as residents and businesses move in, increasing your population and, hopefully, your tax revenue, giving you the capital needed to expand. You set tax rates, manage crime with the strategic placement of police stations, and respond to the needs of your citizens by building airports, stadiums, and parks. Unless you turn them off, you also have to deal with the occasional disaster, manifesting itself as a fire, tornado, or even an attack by a giant monster. Other than that, the game has no end, either good or bad. If you completely run your city into the ground and have no money to fix it, then you have no choice but to restart. But there is no official game over. On the other hand, for as long as you're having some modicum of success, you can continue to tinker with your city indefinitely. The game also includes a handful of scenarios based on real-world situations in which you do have specific goals, but even if you fail to achieve them, you can still keep playing the game. In 1990, under license from Maxis, Nintendo's Entertainment Analysis and Development Group, famously led by Shigeru Miyamoto, programmed from scratch a version of SimCity for release on their 16-bit platform. As with Gradius 3, the game missed the console's North American launch by about a week, but is erroneously considered by some to be a launch title. While the most popular version of the game, at least here, was probably the DOS release, this Super Nintendo installment most closely resembles the more colorful Amiga version.
That's the one I played.
The game plays much the same as every other iteration, but with the expected infusion of some Nintendo magic. Unlike the original game, in this version you're awarded special structures, the first being the mayor's house, and after achieving 500,000 residents, you're given a statue of Mario to place wherever you see fit. It also includes some graphical touches like the seasons changing, and Bowser standing in as the monster as one of the possible disasters. While SimCity would have been perfect for use with the Super Nintendo's mouse, that peripheral was not released until the following year, and is therefore not compatible with this game.
Oh.
That being said, I had no problem playing with the controller.
Really?
From someone who spent countless
Wow,
hours
that's a
playing the
fail.
mouse on a computer. The soundtrack for SimCity was composed by Soyo Oka.
You think they would have been able to
Also
freaking
co-composed
figure
music
something
for
else
Wrestlings
out
by
on that?
Koji Kondo.
I mean, you're using freaking Mario Paint on the goddamn system. Why not use a freaking mouse on SimCity? That's stupid.
Super Mario Kart.
Or even,
She also
ooh, that's a good
rearranged
question.
Kondo's original Super Mario Brothers
That's a
composition
really good
from
question.
1993 Super Mario
Would
All-Stars.
the Super Nintendo version of Power Monger be compatible with the mouse? The Mario Paint mouse? I'm gonna just straight up guess no, right out of the gates. But that would be kind of cool if you had a mouse to click on stuff. Because it would feel probably less cumbersome. They probably, you see, it's probably not. It's probably not set up for that. Because, I mean, you'd think you'd need... I don't think that would work. Because I want to say there's only 2 buttons on the mouse. And I don't know how you would do that. You'd probably need extra tabs in the game to, like, maybe, like, what do you call it? To adjust the camera. I'm sure there's like 2 or 3 small things that you just would not have access to if you were using the mouse. So right out of the gates, I'm gonna say I couldn't do that, or that wouldn't work.
This Super Nintendo version of the game may not be the ideal way to play SimCity for the modern retro gamer, but it is an excellent version of the game, and was certainly the most accessible means of playing SimCity back then for those who weren't fortunate enough to have access to a home computer.
Yeah, see, that's how I kind of felt. Because that was like a computer game on a console.
The original R-Type
Holy shit, is this Sega?
by Irem and began what is, for most people, their most well-known franchise. The game was released in 1987 and was actually distributed here in the United States by Nintendo, although the game was never ported to the NES.
The soundtrack sounded like a Sega soundtrack. It's all...
The engine and TurboGrafx 16. And the Sega Master System, where it was ported by Shooter Powerhouse Compile. R-Type has you piloting the R9A Arrowhead, fighting against the evil hordes of the Fido Empire. The franchise as a whole is known for its slower pace, but that doesn't make it any easier. Probably the 2 most noteworthy aspects of the gameplay are the ability to charge up your weapon for a more powerful shot, and the helper ship called the Force Pod. The Force Pod is picked up as a power-up and can attach to either the front or back of your ship, where it both adds extra firepower and acts as a shield of sorts. You can also send it out to act as a remote secondary weapon, which is particularly useful when it's equipped to shoot vertically instead of straight ahead. In 1989, Irem released R-Type 2, and the game feels and plays like a natural continuation of the original. As the game is 2 years newer, there's the expected bump in graphics and sound, with the only notable change to the gameplay being the ability to doubly charge your weapon for an even more powerful super shot. In 1991, Irem released a reworked version of the game on the Super Famicom as Super R-Type, and the game appeared on store shelves here in North America in early September. 4 of the game's stages are brought over from R-Type 2, but the other 3, including the unimaginative first level of the game, are newly designed. R-Type 2 was already harder than the original, but inexplicably the designers chose to remove mid-level checkpoints from this home version, meaning that when you die, even if during a boss battle, you have to start the entire level over again. The graphics in Super R-Type can best be described as inconsistent. In some levels, the bland backgrounds and muted color schemes make the game appear unimpressive, while other levels look much the opposite and show off what the Super Nintendo's expanded color palette brought to the table. Although perhaps not as severe as Gradius 3, Super R-Type does suffer from some slowdown during frenzied periods of on-screen action. On the plus side, Irem took excellent advantage of the Super Nintendo's sound capabilities to make improvements to the game's soundtrack. credited with excellent sound effects. Super R-Type was well received upon release, but with the gift of hindsight, the game just falls flat, which explains why it's one of the cheapest big-name titles on the Super Nintendo. I don't enjoy this game as much as the original, and as such, were I in the market for a shooter in the fall of 1991, picking Gradius 3 over this game would have been an easy decision. While the original R-Type did not appear on either the Famicom or NES, Super R-Type belatedly brought the franchise to Nintendo's home hardware and set the stage for the outstanding home-exclusive R-Type 3, released for the Super Nintendo in 1994.
Yeah, dude.
One-on-one fighters, beat-em-ups were among the most popular titles.
He's doing this on an on a Frame Meister totally.
Multiplayer play, and due to the immersive atmospheres and storylines combined with greater variety between stages, the games were more compelling when compared to many traditional single-screen arcade offerings. A pioneer in the field was Technos Japan, whose 1986 release Renegade set the stage stylistically for what we now consider a beat-em-up. They would follow this up the following
Double
year with
Dragon.
smash hit Double Dragon. And Sega would join the party in the spring of 1989 with Golden Axe.
Yeah, I like the beat 'em ups.
Predictably, Capcom wanted to jump into the mix and tasked Yoshiki Okamoto and Akira Yasuda with developing the company's first street brawler. Inspired by Double Dragon 2 and loosely based on the 1984 film Streets of Fire, the game was at one point
Streets of
written as
Fire?
a sequel to the original Street Fighter.
What's that
Even
movie?
being demonstrated at trade shows under the title Street Fighter 89 before being released in
It's funny how I find
1989
movies and I'm like,
Capcom's
interesting, what's that?
CPS hardware is Final Fight. In the game, Metro City's mayor, ex-pro wrestler Mike Hager, is on a quest to rescue his kidnapped daughter from the Mad Gear gang with the help of martial artists Cody and Guy. Final Fight, in my opinion, ushered in a new generation of beat-em-ups, setting a new standard for the genre.
How's he not going to talk about Turtles in Time?
By far and away, the most detailed graphics and largest sprites yet seen in a beat-em-up, and introduced a level of control that made the aforementioned games feel primitive in comparison. As would come to be the norm, the game plays differently depending on which character you choose. Mike Hager is the slowest and has the weakest special attack, but makes up for it with the strongest normal attack and stoutest defense. Guy is the exact opposite, and Cody falls somewhere in between. Names and appearances of many of the enemies in the game take cues from 80s pop culture figures, most notably Andore, who is clearly a ripoff of the great Andre the Giant. Much as it had in the early days of the Genesis back in 1989 and 1990, Capcom played a major role in the Super Nintendo's early third-party lineup. Arriving in stores in late September, a port of Final Fight was the first of 3 games that the company would release on the Super Nintendo in 1991. This version is a passable home translation with a few unfortunate omissions. The ability to play cooperatively is, of course, a hallmark of the beat-em-up genre, but the Super Nintendo version of Final Fight famously lacks a simultaneous 2-player mode. Guy, who has always been my character of choice, has also been omitted, as has the industrially themed 4th level. In both cases, supposedly due to the limited memory capacity of cartridges in the early days of the system. This version is also noticeably easier than the arcade original, although I'm not sure I'd call that a flaw. Final Fight is often compared to the Streets of Rage series in much the same way that Gradius is forever linked to R-Type. Final Fight was released on the Super Nintendo not long after the first Streets of Rage on the Genesis, with reviews for the two games even appearing side by side in the August 1991 issue of Electronic Gaming Monthly. Final Fight would sell nearly 1.5 million copies on the Super Nintendo and was one of Capcom's most successful games on Nintendo's 16-bit hardware. While it's far less arcade perfect than the 1993 release on the Sega CD, it's still one of the better beat-em-ups on the system, and was at the very least worth a rental.
Did I just get hit with a knife?
Days of the Super Nintendo.
That was weird.
Another 1989 Capcom CPS
UN
release,
Squadron.
Area 88 is an arcade shooter based on the manga and anime series of the same name, centered around a group of young mercenary fighter pilots based in the Middle East. Similar to the aforementioned Final Fight, at the beginning of the game you choose from 3 available characters, each of whom fly a different plane which draws its strengths from its real-world counterpart. Shin Kazama, who is the protagonist of the original manga series, flies the agile F-20 Tiger Shark and is ostensibly the most balanced of the 3 characters. Mickey Simon's F-14 Tomcat, made famous by the 1985 movie Top Gun, has a stronger forward weapon with a slightly slower rate of fire, but is still the best character for air-to-air combat. Finally, Greg Gates, who is in the manga and anime a fairly minor character but a fan favorite, flies the A-10 Thunderbolt, whose weapon lacks punch but shoots both straight ahead and at a downward angle, making it a jack of all trades but master of none. Unlike more traditional games like Gradius and R-Type, Area 88 eschews the ubiquitous space shooter paradigm, instead taking place right here on planet Earth. While Capcom already had experience creating shooters in the pseudo-realistic realm with the vertically scrolling 1942 series, Area 88 is a side-scrolling affair. Perhaps a carryover from 1943, this game features a health bar instead of one-hit kills, but as a result you have just one life. Like fellow CPS release Forgotten Worlds, Area 88 features an interstage shop. As a mercenary, defeating enemies earns you money, which can then be used to purchase secondary weapons including a variety of missiles and bombs, as well as defensive power-ups including shields and maximum health increases. Each airplane is tied to its primary weapon, which can be upgraded over the course of the game by picking up power-ups dropped by enemies. Differently colored tokens are worth different denominations of POW points, and once you accumulate enough of them, your weapon levels up. Area 88 was brought to Western arcades as UN Squadron.
Yeah, I was gonna say, why does that look exactly like UN Squadron?
Series have been localized here. The game was ported to the Super Nintendo in 1991 and was shipped out to stores in late September alongside Final Fight. While the game was the third horizontally scrolling shooter to be released in the span of about a month, UN Squadron was unique enough to be worthy of consideration, having undergone a number of changes while being remade for the Super Nintendo. In the arcade, the game uses a standard linear level progression.
I'll say, am I like the last one
map screen that to a certain extent allows you to choose the order in which you play the game, and also adds some bonus levels, giving you further opportunity to earn some extra cash. This is particularly helpful because the game no longer ties each character to a particular aircraft, instead allowing you to purchase pricey new airplanes in the shop. Naturally, UN Squadron gets progressively harder as you advance, and does require a certain amount of memorization, but like any good shooter, it never feels cheap. While both Gradius 3 and Super R-Type primarily took place in the cold starkness of space, the terrestrial settings of UN Squadron give it a visual warmth that the other two games lack. Expectedly, the graphics took a hit coming home from the arcade, but the game still looks great, and like Super R-Type, doesn't suffer from too much slowdown. The soundtrack, on the other hand, is fairly unremarkable, and while the explosions sound cool, as it did in the arcade, your plane's primary weapon sounds like an old man blowing his nose.
No way. How the hell?
The arcade game was of course allowed for two-player simultaneous play, but once again, Capcom has removed this feature in the home version, although I don't think it's as big a deal in a shooter as it is in a video. Overall, this is a great game.
What the fuck?
Did something a little bit different with the genre, and would have been for me, alongside Gladius 3, a must-buy shooter in the fall of 1991.
Come on, kill me and get it over with. It's taking you so long.
ActRaiser is a god game and side-scrolling action platformer. The game was the first developed by Tokyo-based Quintet.
Finally, got a hit on him.
Soul Blazer and Illusion of Gaia, and was published by Enix of Dragon Warrior fame, appearing on North American store shelves in the last week of October. In the original Japanese version, you play the role of God, battling Satan for control of the Earth. But for the Super Nintendo release, in order to cater to Western sensibilities, God was changed to the Master, and Satan to Congress, so as not to ruffle the wrong feathers. In case the evil deity and his minions have taken over the land, and it's up to you as the good deity to clean some house and make the land again safe for habitation. ActRaiser's world features 6 unique lands, in which the simulation mode is sandwiched in between 2 action-based stages. Once you set your game up in the Sky Palace, you begin the first stint of action platforming after a sleep mode set in transition. Here, both the ambiance and the manner in which your character handles remind me of Wizards and Warriors. Yes. At the beginning of the game, your character has no magic, so your only offensive weapon is your sword. The first stage acts as sort of an initial house cleaning to make the land hospitable for your people, so that after the boss battle, you can transition into your first simulation stage and help your people establish themselves. As the simulation mode begins, your first task is to direct your people to build toward the monster layers from the newly constructed temple, allowing for them to be sealed by the locals. Until they do so, you'll have to use your sheriff, who acts as both consultant and your boots-on-the-ground proxy, to dispatch the various enemies still wandering free, including bats, imps, and what look like baby dragons. You also listen to the prayers of your people and respond accordingly, doing things like burning bushes, accepting offerings which help you progress in the game. Once all of the monster layers are sealed, you can trigger the second action platforming stage, the completion of which will finally rid the land of evil and allow you to move on to the next area. Action portions of ActRaiser easily
Let's take a break. Oh, I need to get up and walk around.
Sprite design paired with excellent background detail. The game's bosses in particular are gorgeous to look at and are reminiscent of those found in the Castlevania series. ActRaiser sim sections look understandably less impressive, as developers necessarily sacrificed graphical detail in favor of a larger viewable area. The soundtrack for ActRaiser was written by the great Yuzo Koshiro, better known for his work on the Sega Genesis with Revenge of Shinobi and the Streets of Rage series. The church-like organ music in the Sky Palace and the classically inspired theme of the overworld sound great and are setting appropriate, but perhaps predictably, Koshiro's talent really shines through during the game's action sequences.
We waited all that time just for him to throw him through the window. Seriously? That was anticlimactic.
While on their own, neither of ActRaiser's game modes would make the game a standout title. It's their seamless
If anything, there should be another option for Jason. Like, for example, there should be like a...
ActRaiser 2 was released and did away with the overhead sim-style gameplay.
like a special kill for Jason. Like, you do a certain set of things, and then you can get like a special kill with Jason, or like... I don't know, like something.
ActRaiser does let you play straight through the 12 action stages of the game using the professional mode, unlocked once you've beaten the game, and so named because the enemies are harder to kill and you have no magic. ActRaiser is an excellent game that unfortunately suffers from being both too
Yeah, I'm gonna take a break. I need to get up and walk around. Plus, I've been streaming this for a while.
Would have, for me, relegated it to...
Just give me like about 3 minutes. It shouldn't take very long.
Weekend rental territory. The game is still a solid must-play, however, and is absolutely worth tracking down today. Bases Loaded was released by Jalico in the summer of 1988, with its TV-style behind-the-pitcher perspective likely influenced by the popular 80s home computer game Hardball. Although not licensed by the MLB or MLBPA, the option to play a complete season, clear digitized speech, and reasonably good music and visuals made it one of the most popular baseball games of the 8-bit era. In early November of 1991, Jalico brought the franchise to the Super Nintendo with Super Bases Loaded, right around the same time that Bases Loaded 3 was being released on the NES. For both games, Jalico paid for a celebrity endorsement from future Hall of Fame second baseman Ryne Sandberg, then playing for the Chicago Cubs, but he does not appear in the game. Super Bases Loaded maintains the same TV-style presentation ostensibly intended to make the game more immersive, and while the graphics are nothing special, the game does sprinkle in a little bit of Mode 7. But the audio as a whole makes it sound like you're playing the game in a bathroom. The removal of the pennant race mode cuts down on the game's replay value, and overall there's really nothing here that would make me want to upgrade from any number of baseball games on the NES. Those would include Culture Brain's Baseball Simulator 1000, which, while not as well known as heavy hitters like RBI Baseball or Bases Loaded, was one of the better baseball games on the system. The game allows you to both create your own teams and play full seasons, which already sets it apart from the majority of baseball games on the NES. Although you can play a game of straight baseball, the use of the word simulator in the title is a bit ironic, since what really makes Baseball Simulator 1000 stick out from the crowd is the over-the-top arcade-style play of the Ultra League. Here you have access to what the game calls Ultra Plays, which include a number of trick hits and pitches, adding a whole new layer of fun to the game of baseball. Making it out sometime before Christmas, in 1991, Culture Brain released Super Baseball 1000 on the Super Nintendo. The game retains the features of the 8-bit original while adding a bevy of new Ultra Plays. As one would expect, the game's visuals have improved, but Super Baseball Simulator 1000 certainly doesn't push the 16-bit envelope, and I wish they had chosen a brighter color palette. The first game had an excellent soundtrack, and that continues to be the case with this iteration, which features organ-based music that fits right in with the genre. Were you hoping for a baseball game for your Super Nintendo under the tree on Christmas morning, you'd have much preferred it to be this one. The most famous football franchise in the history of video games got its start on the Apple II home computer with the 1988 release of John Madden Football. The series continued on the Sega Genesis with a game that revolutionized sports gaming on home consoles. John Madden Football came closer to simulating the game of football than any video game released prior, with the full 11 players per side on the field. Penalties, a proper play clock, and perhaps most importantly, the signature Madden playbook. Although it was far from perfect, upon its release in the fall of 1990, John Madden Football was, in terms of immersion and realism, the greatest football video game ever created. In the fall of 1991, John Madden Football 92 appeared on the Genesis at about the same time as the series made its debut on the Super Nintendo. This installment of the franchise was highly anticipated by sports gamers who thought that the Super Nintendo's advanced scaling and rotation effects were going to take the series to the next level. The game has the same options found on the Genesis, meaning that while you can't play a full season, you can at least play through a complete playoff tournament. The game lacks NFL and NFLPA licenses, a feature that wouldn't be seen in the franchise until Madden 94. Unfortunately, starting a game, it becomes evident that John Madden Football wasn't able to live up to the pre-release hype, with a choppy frame rate that makes the game almost unplayable. On the plus side, this Super Nintendo release has better color and therefore more detail than the Genesis games, and although both games share many of the same sound samples, they sound much clearer on the Super Nintendo than on the Genesis. Although that's to be expected, as both are strengths of the former system and weaknesses of the latter.
First down.
Overall, the first installment of John Madden Football on the Super Nintendo was a disappointment for gamers who had no other choice if they insisted on playing football on Nintendo's 16-bit platform in 1991. With apologies to Darius Rucker, a.k.a. Hootie, the most famous Darius was probably Darius the Great, who ruled the Persian Empire at the peak of its power
Hootie and the
from
Blowfish.
522 to 486 BC. The Darius video game franchise, on the other hand, got its start almost 2,500 years later, when Taito released the ichthyologically themed original in 1987. The game was housed in a unique arcade cabinet that used 3 CRTs to create an ultra-widescreen display.
Holy shit.
The game and the franchise as a whole is known for its choose-your-own-adventure style of level progression, and its aforementioned pseudo.
Is that what it took to run those? Oh my god, those things probably just ate CRT TVs.
At the outset, your ship is equipped with both a standard cannon and bombs, with enemies dropping color-coded power-ups that upgrade either your gun,
But that's pretty
bombs,
cool, though.
or shields. Darius is eye-poppingly colorful and has a great
But you gotta think though, if it's got 3 CRT TVs in it, that means it's almost 3 times as big as your average arcade cabinet.
Providing as much fun as its contemporaries. Permutations of the arcade
But that's pretty cool, though.
appearances on a variety
I-
of home gaming platforms, but
I'm trying to think back into my
preserve the 3-screen format.
experiences, and did I ever run into a double or a... I think I did. I think there was 1 or 2 that I barely recall, but I was so young, I didn't know the difference. I was just like, video games, arcade. I didn't care. Oh, that's a good question. That's something I've never actually even, I've never even thought of that. So I want to say that Ninja Warriors game, that might have been
Here, Darius makes a successful transition to home TV screens.
a 1 or 2 CRT.
Cornerstone of the series, Darius Twin features impressive sprite artwork.
Yeah, I want to say it was, because it felt like when I was watching it, it felt like I was looking into like a theater kind of a thing. It was weird. It definitely was a different kind of arcade cabinet. Oh, wow.
Graphics rival those of Gradius 3.
One of these days, I'm going to have to go on like a trip. I'm going to have to find a place that has a lot of like rare arcade games, like
and a secondary
possible
weapon
like
that
arcade
drops
museums,
bombs that can be
possibly,
upgraded to shoot
possibly.
all 4 diagonal
Just someplace
directions,
that
making it an
deals
effective
and
means of
likes
protecting your
to
flanks.
have
As was the case
rare
with
arcade
previous entries
games,
in the series,
rare arcade
most
cabinets.
enemies in the game require multiple shots to kill, which I guess is just a pet peeve of mine.
Because, oh, that's a good one. That'd
Although
be a good
the game
idea.
allows you to adjust your number of lives in the options menu, it gives you
Because I remember when I went to Games Works up there in Seattle, they had a little kind of a mini old school arcade. I think, God, it was so long ago. And I didn't even go there to look at the arcade. I just went straight for the pinball. I didn't look at anything else. I was straight up there to play pinball and nothing more. I was not looking at anything else. I was like, I need to play pinball and I need to play pinball now. But their retro old school arcade, it either wasn't that big. I don't think it was that big. I mean, they had like Dig Dug, Frogger, like the easy shit. But as far as anything like overly cool or amazing, and I don't recall anything that majorly stuck out at me. I don't even think they had like Simpsons or they might have had like Ninja Turtles there. They might have had Ninja Turtles, maybe. I don't remember anything else special there.
Original Final Fantasy was released on the Famicom in 1987, its success was both a surprise and savior, with the professional fate of its creator, Hironobu Sakaguchi, hanging in the balance. Sakaguchi had dropped out of a university engineering program 4 years earlier to design
So I can't even remember the last time I seen an actual arcade, a good arcade cabinet.
Both the 3D Battles of World Runner and Highway Star, released in the West as Rad Racer. Inspired by games like Ultima and Wizardry,
especially since if I could find Ninja Baseball Batman, them damn Cinemassacre guys freaking talked it up so much. I wouldn't mind getting my hands on that and actually playing that a little bit in an arcade. That'd be cool.
Legendary Nobuo Uematsu, Final Fantasy was an epic undertaking requiring a 15-person team to complete. Along with the iconic Dragon Quest series, Final Fantasy is the game most
like I kind of wonder, since there's a Fun Spot on the East Coast, is there any place like Fun Spot on the West Coast? I gotta assume there is. There has to be. There has to be.
Unlike Dragon Quest, Final Fantasy allows the
there has to be like a
party at the game's outset, choosing the class of each character for a more customized gameplay.
There has to be. There just has to be.
The game also has a more compelling storyline and superior artwork, thanks in part to the work of character designer Yoshitaka Amano. The Japanese public, whose appetite for RPGs had been whet by the first installment in the aforementioned Dragon Quest series in 1986, scooped up hundreds of thousands of copies of Final Fantasy, giving Sakaguchi's career a new lease on life and propelling Square from near anonymity to marquee third-party developer in the coming years. Based on its success in Japan, in the spring of 1990, Nintendo of America localized and published Final Fantasy, releasing it here to moderate success. 2 more games were released on the Famicom, but due to the delay in releasing the original in North America, Square and Nintendo chose to skip localizing the 8-bit sequels in favor of Final Fantasy IV, which was released on the Super Famicom in the summer of 1991. As it was the second entry in the series to be released in the West, the name was changed to Final Fantasy II, and the game was in stores in the middle of November, just in time to take advantage of the Christmas shopping season. Final Fantasy II initially sold for $69.99, and while the high price of RPGs on the Super Nintendo is often blamed on the price of ROM chips, Final Fantasy II was just 8 megabits, as was the majority of the console's 1991 lineup. As the series moved from the anonymous heroes of the first game to characters with defined personality and backstory, you can no longer create custom parties, But that simply comes as a trade-off for the more complex storylines and deeper character development that this game has to offer. The plot centers around the Dark Knight noted for challenging the king's motives for stealing elemental crystals from neighboring kingdoms. As it turns out, a sinister force is behind the thievery.
Wow,
and it's
really?
up to Cecil and his revolving cast of supporting characters to save the world. Designed by Takashi Tokita with Sakaguchi serving as director, the game plays more like an interactive epic and really helped set the stage for subsequent Japanese role-playing games. Final Fantasy II also marked the first Western appearance of series mainstays, including Sid, Chocobos, and active time battles, which put a unique spin on turn-based fighting. Japanese-style role-playing games are fairly polarizing in the Western gaming community. Either people love them or hate them. And usually this hinges on how one feels about the random battle encounters, the frequency of which in Final Fantasy II is elevated to say the least. Final Fantasy II makes excellent use of the Super Nintendo's Mode 7 on the overworld, and the game's graphics as a whole are serviceable if unremarkable. Once again written by Nobuo Uematsu, the game's soundtrack really makes the system's sound chip sing. And as would be a defining feature of the franchise, the music serves as the primary driver of the mood in any given scene.
I think this is going to be the last match for now. And I'm going to cut the stream. Come on.
Final Fantasy II is a great game in its own right and raised the bar for 16-bit JRPGs, setting the stage for subsequent Square releases like Final Fantasy III, which is considered by some to be the best game in the franchise, and the universally acclaimed Chrono Trigger. Even at $69.99, the tens of hours of entertainment value this game had to offer would have made it an easy must-buy upon its release, and I suspect that it found itself on countless Christmas wish
Really?
lists.
See, this is why I'm getting tired playing right now. They just keep kicking.
Makaimura, or Demon World Village, was created by video game designer Tokuro Fujiwara, released by Capcom in 1985, and brought west as Ghosts and Goblins. Princess Prin Prin has been kidnapped by Satan himself, and it's up to you, playing as Sir Arthur, to rescue her from the demonic horde. Ghosts and Goblins is an action platformer best known for its engagingly spooky atmosphere, variety of weapons and enemies, and crushing difficulty, along with neat graphical touches like Arthur rocking a pair of boxer shorts if he loses his armor. A substandard port was released on the Famicom and NES, but still managed to be one of the more popular games on the platform, selling just under 1.7 million copies.
Jesus,
In
that does look hard.
1988, its sequel, Dai Makaimura, or Great Demon World Village, debuted on Capcom's CPS hardware and was released in the West as Ghouls and Ghosts. A Yuji Naka programmed home port was one of the first games
Jesus,
released
they
on the
freaking
Sega
ported
Genesis,
that
and
or
retains
used
both
it
its
on in
signature
like a different
atmosphere
market
and
like 100
challenging gameplay.
times. Yeah, see, I didn't even know that.
Notable additions include the ability to shoot straight up and down.
Yeah, see, I noticed that too.
And the appearance of treasure chests, which contain either a weapon, an evil magician who transforms you into one of two hapless forms if you don't kill him fast enough, or a gold armor upgrade. which allows you to charge
Yeah, I
your
didn't even
weapon
know they
for
had ghouls and
powerful
ghosts
shots.
on Sega. I didn't even know that. And it's different too. It's not just like an exact port of the Super Nintendo version. It's a little there's major I don't want to say major differences, but there are definitely differences.
The game was purpose designed for Nintendo's 16-bit hardware. In late November,
Yeah, see, that's the version I'm familiar with.
Capcom's last release of the year
The
on
Super Nintendo version.
when it hit store shelves as Super Ghouls and Ghosts. Series protagonist Sir Arthur has made some bad decisions regarding.
It's kind of crazy how that version has a bunch of itty-bitty differences of the versions, but they're all still pretty playable for the most part, as far as I can tell. Except for the difficulty, of course. The difficulty in having to play twice is just, ugh. It's like a sledgehammer to your balls.
Does little to reinvent the wheel, predictably dropping.
But it's still a good game, though. It's still a good game. I mean, it's still fun, it's challenging, and the graphics are amazing.
Which can immediately be used to uncover the first treasure chest. Again, along with the returning evil magician, they contain armor upgrades and a host of new weapons. The double jump also allowed the designers to get more creative with the platforming, requiring the maneuver in order to progress through certain parts of the game. With the aforementioned armor upgrades comes an upgrade to your offensive abilities. The bronze armor enchants your weapon with magical abilities. And as was the case,
It kind of sucks too. The Sega version is kind of expensive. Not ultra expensive, but it's, I shouldn't say expensive, but it's definitely more than you'd want to spend.
You can also pick up
It's like 40, I think, 45 for the cartridge.
While the game does suffer,
I'll still eventually one day buy it, but probably not anytime soon.
And Capcom even snuck in some well-executed Mode 7 rotation.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Super Ghouls and Ghosts also has, in my opinion, the best atmosphere and variety of levels among any game in the series. Mari Yamaguchi, who also wrote the music for Mega Man 5 and rearranged the Street Fighter II soundtrack for its 1993 release on the PC Engine, wrote the entire soundtrack for this game, with the exception of the map screen music and the first level track, as both are series standards. Common among many multi-platform franchises during the 16-bit era, here the Super Nintendo installment has by far and away the best music in the series. Stated, the franchise has a reputation for being brutally difficult, and Super Ghouls and Ghosts gives no quarter in that regard. Oddly, Capcom chose to remove the ability to attack above or below your character, which obviously doesn't make the game any easier. However, just like the previous entries in the series, the challenge is part of what makes the game compelling.
Yeah.
The game was no doubt under many a Christmas tree in 1991.
That's almost a game I'd rather go on an emulator and take the wussy way out.
Super Castlevania 4 was actually the 9th game, not the 4th, released in Konami's signature franchise between 1987 and 1991. It was preceded by, in order of release, the original game on the NES, Vampire Killer on the MSX, Simon's Quest, the lesser-known Haunted Castle in the arcade, Castlevania the Adventure on the Game Boy, Dracula's Curse, Boku Dracula-kun on the Famicom, if you want to count that one, and Belmont's Revenge. The Japanese version of Super Castlevania 4 is a reimagining of the original Castlevania, as it retells an alternate version of the same story. It's 1691, evil forces have resurrected Dracula, and it's up to Simon Belmont and his trusty vampire killer whip to, well, kill him. For its North American localization, however, the story was altered in a way that doesn't really make sense, so the game is not considered to be part of the official Castlevania timeline. While I'm a huge fan of at least 2 of the games on the NES, fairly unforgiving controls were a defining feature of the franchise up to this point. Super Castlevania 4, on the other hand, gives you much more control over your character. You can adjust your movement mid-air after a jump, can whip in any direction, and can jump onto staircases rather than starting only at the top or bottom. While these features do make the game easier than its predecessors, they also make the game more fun to play. Speaking of difficulty, this game is, in my opinion, the easiest Castlevania game of the 8 and 16-bit eras. The boss battles in particular are generally a cakewalk, and I usually find myself dying through more mundane means. One of the hallmarks of the Castlevania franchise is the atmosphere in each game, created from a combination of the visual art,
This is the house I just came
level
from.
layouts, and music.
It is, isn't it?
This game uses a Super Nintendo's
Yeah, it
expanded
is.
color palette to create a level of detail not seen in previous entries in the franchise, and the use of the console's Mode 7 scaling and rotation, while at times nausea-inducing, added to Super Castlevania's impressive visual chops. No conversation about Super Castlevania 4 would be complete without talking about the game's amazing soundtrack. The game was scored by Taro Kudo and Masanori Adachi, who were both newcomers to the series, but who delivered one of the best soundtracks that the franchise has seen to date. Sadly, the only other Castlevania game to make an appearance on the Super Nintendo was 1995's Dracula
Yo,
X,
Creep Gamer 420, what's up?
heavily altered version of Rondo's
How are you
Tale
doing?
on the PC Engine
Happy New Year!
Flash. Super Castlevania 4 is one of my all-time favorite Super Nintendo games, making it an obvious must-buy back in December of 1991, and is still a must-play game to this day.
Run.
Additional titles were released on the Super Nintendo in 1991. Populous by Full Frog Productions,
Populous.
The Chessmaster by Software Toolworks,
So you a Friday the 13th fan, Creep Gamer?
Drop-In by Kenpo Seika,
Here I come to save the day.
Ultraman by Nova Games Limited, Hole-in-One Golf by HAL Laboratories,
Aw, that sucks. No, Tommy, no.
Bill Lamphere's Combat Basketball by Hudson Soft,
Ow.
True Golf Classics Wild
Oh,
Club by TNT. Hyperzone by HAL Laboratories.
Run, run, run and run some more.
RPM Racing by Silicon and Synapse.
Come on, man, I suck at the axe. Alright, well, I'm gonna get credit for using you. My axe is better than your axe, Jason.
You want some more? Oh my god! Oh my god! What happened?
Oh, timber! Oh, take my pot. Wash my pots and pans, Jason. You lazy son of a bitch.
On January 19, we're outnumbered. The greatest heroes. We're ready for anything. Don't make deadlines. Okay, Real Strong, the declassified true story of the horse soldiers. Wait on.
Welcome to this edition of the Not So Common podcast on Unpack Country. This is the post-Christmas, post-moving edition, although when you move, it's almost never a definitive cut. It's sort of gradual in pieces. Where after I record this, I'll be going back to the condo and emptying more boxes of garbage and Tupperware in the kitchen, stuff in the balcony, older quality controllers, and things of that nature. What the hell is everyone doing? I hope you had a nice holiday. This is closing out 2017. What a year it's been. First and foremost, I want to thank each and every one of you out there listening to this. Listening to this, that means you follow my work in some form or another, I guess. And by you doing that, it's made this a very good year for me, and it's allowed me the opportunity and the privilege of, buying my first house. I don't say I was going to buy more, like my first home, like my first house. I mean, I bought, a condo. A condo's kind of...
Come to mommy, come to mommy.
Anyway, thank you so
Come
much
to
for
mommy,
supporting
come to mommy.
the YouTube channel.
Alright, I think that's it for me. I've been streaming this for almost 2 hours now. But I might be back a little later.
Marathon.
We'll see.